Hello, I'm Axel from AudioCodes, and welcome to the fifth episode in our series on the AI agents functionality in the LiveHub platform. In today's session, we're going to explore variables and dynamic prompting. Let's start with variables. The idea is simple. Imagine you've written a prompt where the customer's name appears in several places. Now, suppose you decide to change that name. Sure, you could manually update each mention in the prompt. That works, but it's not exactly elegant. Wouldn't it be nicer if you could define the name once as a variable and then reuse it everywhere? Exactly, and that's what LiveHub allows you to do. Inside your AI agent's configuration screen, you'll find a variable section. Here, you could define your variables using a simple key equals value format, like this. Each line represents a different variable. Once defined, these variables can be referenced in your prompt. Just wrap the variable name in curly brackets. The prompt editor even highlights them for you, so they stand out from the rest of the text. Behind the scenes, LiveHub expands those variables before sending the prompt to the LLM. In other words, the LLM only sees the fully expanded prompt, not the variable placeholders. Now, here's something even more useful. You can use variables not only inside the prompt, but also in the welcome message and in your tool's configuration. For example, let's look at the Doctor Clinic Quick Start. In that setup, there's a variable that holds the API key for the cal.com account. That same variable is reused across multiple tools, the one that lists available time slots, another one that adds new appointment to the calendar, and so on. And here's a bonus. When you're working with multi-agent topologies, variables are automatically inherited by subagents. In the Doctor Clinic Quick Start, we define the API key variable once at the main agent level, and the LiveHub copied it down to all subagents and their tools. So far, we've talked about the variables you define yourself. But LiveHub also provides a set of predefined variables. These are automatically filled in from the agent's configuration. And there's more. LiveHub also pulls in conversation data, which adds variables like the caller's number and the callee's number in voice calls. One important detail, conversation data will override variables with the same name. That's actually quite handy. For example, suppose your agent needs the callee number. You can test it right in the chat interface by defining a variable with that name. In chat sessions, your variable is used. But in real voice sessions, it's automatically replaced with the actual conversation data. There's one more variable that deserves special attention: time and date. Why is this important? Well, quite often you'll want your agent to know the current time. For example, so it can greet the user with a good morning or good evening. For that, LiveHub provides two predefined variables: current time and current date. But here's the catch. Time is meaningless without a time zone. So how do you make sure the time is calculated correctly? There are two ways. The first and recommended way is to use the time zone variable. You simply set it to full name, like Europe, Paris, or America, Chicago. This sets the default time zone for all date and time variables, as well as any time-related tools. The second option is to specify the time zone inline when you actually reference the variable in your prompt. That's useful if your prompt needs to handle times from different locations. But in most cases, it's simpler and cleaner to just set the time zone variable once. All right, hope that's clear. Now let's move on to prompt expansion. Variables are great, but sometimes you want your prompt to adapt dynamically. That's where conditional statements come in. For example, imagine you want your agent to greet the user based on the current time. You can do this by using simple conditional constructs. The conditions are very flexible. You can use arithmetic, string, and Boolean operators to shape your logic. Here's the key point. Prompt expansion happens before the prompt is sent to the LLM. So in our greeting example, the LLM doesn't see all the conditional logic. It only receives the final, expanded line with the correct greeting. And of course, you can mix in predefined variables and conversation data in those conditions, just like you would anywhere else. Up until now, we've been talking about regular prompt expansion that happens just once at the beginning of the conversation. But LiveHub AI agents let you create truly dynamic prompts, which can change from one user utterance to the next. This is a game changer. It helps reduce prompt size and makes it easier to implement complex branching logic that LLMs might struggle to handle on their own. Dynamic prompts are activated via the Dynamic Prompt Configuration parameter in the Advanced tab. Once enabled, you can still use all your regular branching logic and variable expansions. But now, your prompts are reevaluated after every user utterance. You also gain access to some additional variables, like user utterance count, and duration. These allow your agent to react dynamically based on what the user actually says or does. I'll be honest, this is a super powerful tool. For certain scenarios, it lets you solve problems that would otherwise be very tricky or cumbersome. Okay, we're done for today. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for the future episodes.